which the Mishnah Gemara explain what are the obligations of a husband to a wife. There are 10 obligations, of which a number of them are not spelled out in the kesuba. For example, after Chav Beishvat, the Rebbe called in Reb Zalman Gerari, and he wanted to have an accounting to the penny of all of the funeral expenses, because he wants to reimburse him. So Reb Zalman tells the Rebbe, "Don't worry, it's all taken care of. It's all done." And the Rebbe tells him, "No, this is the funeral expenses is an obligation of the kesuba, even though it doesn't mention anything about funerals in the kesuba, but it's one of the tnoya kesuba, which it's alluded to in what? In a fairness, the fairness, parnasa means provide for all your needs, so it's included there implicitly. It's not stated there, and the Rebbe tells him that since it's one of the conditions of the kesuba, it's my obligation. And the Rebbe said, going back to what Rabbi William said before, and the Rebbe said, my kesuba is especially precious to me because it was written by the previous Rebbe. And he told him the story that what happened was that the kesuba had been lost, and therefore they realized, by the time the chasana was over and they got back, I don't know, it was like 3 a.m. Actually, the kesuba actually was written later. The date of it is actually a later date. Because when they realized the kesuba was lost, so they needed it right away, so the previous Rebbe wrote out the kesuba in his own hand, not on a napkin, I don't think, but he wrote out the kesuba, and therefore, since the kesuba was written by the previous Rebbe, we had that special cheshivas to him. But in any case, that's one of the conditions of the kesuba is burial. Another condition is, which also not stated in the kesuba, is to be paid the pinyin shvuyim in case she's captured. Which nowadays this is not such a big issue of people being held for ransom, but there was a time when it was. It's an obligation of the husband to do it. But basically, the obligations are to provide food, clothing, place to live. An obligation for marital relations. This is an obligation which the husband has to the wife, it's something which the wife is entitled to, and the husband gives it as an obligation. And do I remember all 10 offhand? No, but
Mazonas.
Right, that we said.
And supporting her kids. That's part of the 10. And after that passing away, she could stay in his house.
Okay, right, whatever.
So what?
Okay, and then that's part. So in the text you have these obligations. Then you also have that what the wife brings into the marriage. She brings her own dowry or whatever things that she brings, which have to also be. In fact, but as far as we actually write specific, sometimes it has to be evaluated and valued at some amount. How much did she bring in? Because in the case of the dissolution of the marriage, whatever, it's her property which she brings into the marriage that the husband has the right to make use of, but it still belongs to her, so he has to put a value to it. And then the husband matches that with an equal amount in the standard text which we Ashkenazim use. As far as them, they fill it in as they go along. He throws in another few goats or whatever, and that's basically the text. And then you made a kinyan and you sign.
Didn't you miss the main point of the kesuba?
The what?
Why don't you should take halabein of leitzia?
Yeah, that's the reason why. Why? Okay, that assumes that it's the kind of the rabbanon. That there's a reason for it. Okay. Had you, when I asked you what you wanted, but I told me I would have prepared all the stuff. Okay, you told you wanted to know interesting things, questions.
I had this problem that people get married, they sign a kesuba, and they have no idea what it says.
Okay, so you're supposed to, when you do, one of the things that are officiating rabbi is supposed to do is before signing the kesuba, he has to make sure that the chassan knows exactly what it says. You read it to him, or paraphrase it as necessary to spell out, this is what it says.
So when you officiate a wedding, what do you tell us? What do you tell a chassan as they're going to sign the kesuba? What does it say there? Give it to us on one floor.
Well, the things that you just said, that he has his obligations to provide for her and food, clothing, shelter, and so on, and that there's specific. Now the problem, part of it's hard to say, because it's hard to say what is the dollar amount of the value of a kesuba. When we're talking about zuzim and talking about skukim, what does that mean in real money? And different. Actually, you can go to some website actually which lists various major batidim in America, and each one how much they value the kesuba for. There's a difference from bezdin to bezdin. So this is like a support for women who are getting divorced. If they want to maximize the value of the kesuba, you could choose your bezdin that's going to give you more value. Although I don't think it really makes a difference in the end of the day anyway, because usually people who are in that situation are more interested in getting the get and being done with it than worrying about squeezing out a few dollars more, a few dollars less. So what exactly the person's committing to in dollar amount is hard to know. It depends on the fluctuation of the value of the silver. So you can't really tell a person that. Okay, yeah.
What's the reason it's read out loud for everybody to hear?
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was why is the kesuba read?
Out loud for everyone.
Right, it's read out loud. Okay. There are a couple of reasons. The simple reason for it is simply as a time filler. As was explained earlier, I think, that originally they used to have the Kedushin and the Nisuim took place at different times, as much as 12 months apart. And nowadays, because of the difficulties of Golos and not knowing where someone's going to be 12 months from now, so the practice became to do it simultaneously, because otherwise you have a Kedushin where then the woman now is not allowed to marry anyone else, but they're also not ready to live together either, and that you haven't had the Nusuyim. And then if something happens, so then the guy disappears, or who knows what, all the turmoil, another pogrom or whatever, and they're stuck for life. So we made the Kedushin and the Nusuyim take place one right after the other. But since it's really two separate events, and in fact, that's why we make the Ber Priya Gofen twice. The one who does the Seder Kedushin makes the bracha Ber Priya Gofen, then makes the Birchas Erusin. Okay? And then afterwards, for the Sheva brachas, you also start again with another Ber Priya Gofen. Right? Because it's another separate ceremony, separate event, it gets its own thing. So you have to somehow separate the two. So what are you going to separate the two? You can, I guess, play a musical interlude. You could, go have refreshments, but then you'll never get the Jews back together for the Sheva brachas. So the thing to do, we'll read the kesuba. So that's one reason.
No significance to read.
One second. Now, one second. According to our minhag, that we write and sign the kesuba before the chuppah begins, so really it doesn't mean anything. Others have the minhag, in fact, that it's read then, and it is signed then under the chuppah. Okay,
Because it makes sense. Because how could you rewrite something that didn't happen? How could you?
Okay, in the kesuba it says, one interesting. In the kesuba we refer to the chassan most of the times as chasan dinan, if that rings a bell. The chassan, and the kala is referred to.
Our chasan means our chassan.
Yeah, and the kala is referred to as maras so and so, which means Mrs. So and so. The first time the chassan is mentioned, and the first time the kala is mentioned, we don't use those titles according to many texts, many versions. And the reason for that is because he is not really a chassan until you get further into the text, where he says that he said to this woman, "Haveli into, be my wife." Utzvias marazda means she agreed. And she agreed to become his wife. After that point, then the subsequent 5 times where the chassan's name is mentioned, we write chasan dinan, and because that is right. So initially, they were recording in the kesuba recording that he asked her to marry her and she agreed. Okay, so now putting this in after the kedushin and before the nisuyin, doing it then makes sense, and so therefore would have to, if the witnesses are going to sign it. I was going to say before, besides explaining to the chassan, the witnesses have to read the whole thing also, because you can't sign something without knowing what it says. The witnesses have to read it through as well. Now, what we do is especially give it to the witnesses and say, "Hey, read it," and you wait a couple of minutes, okay, and when they finish reading it, then you have them sign it. But what others do is they have it read out loud. This solves also the problem of witnesses who may not be that proficient in reading Aramaic and may not know what they're signing. So when it's read by some distinguished personage who's attending the chuppah and he reads it out loud, so then they know, oh, this is the proper text of the kesuba because he said so and we can trust him. And then the witnesses sign afterwards. So then it makes sense to put to sign it, to read it then exactly at that point after the kedushin, before the Nisuyin, because the obligation for the kesuba must be in place in order for it to be Nisuyin, in order to be married. And then they sign it. In fact, there's a whole separate question about when is the proper time to write and sign the kesuba. And here in Chabad we have a minhag which is a little bit different from the minhag of the world in general.
Did I send you Rabbi Bell's question?
Rabbi Bell, who's Rabbi Bell? No. You mentioned to me something about it. I don't think. We do something which others have a bit of a problem with, but the Rebbe says clearly that's what we do, and that's what we do, which is it is possible for a chassan to take upon himself the obligations of the kesuba even before the nisuyin has taken place, and we rely on that. The question is, what date do you write on the kesuba? Okay, so for example, if you have a chasna which will be taking place, the chuppah will be taking place tonight, let's say at 7 o'clock. So halachically, that's tomorrow. Okay, now what if we're writing the kesuba today? Or more important than so much the writing, if we sign the kesuba today, but it's still day, so we write today's date, which is the day before the actual chasna. The chasna takes place on Monday, halachically speaking. We're on the 13th of Shvat, and we're signing it on the 12th of Shvat. So others have a real problem with this, and I was once at a chasana that was running a little bit late, just a few minutes late, and Rabbi Soloveitchik in Chicago was the Masada Kedushin, and he said we have to sign the kesuba on the same day as the chuppah, and therefore we have to wait, since it's already close to Shkia, and the chuppah is not going to take place until Shkia time. So therefore, we have to wait until after Tzeis HaKachavim to sign the kesuba. Because during Shkia, it's the suffix what day it is. So we have to wait now, okay, so we're going to wait now for an hour or whatever. I don't think they wait till Rabbeinu Tam Shkia, but they waited and held up the chuppah for an hour, or 50 minutes or whatever, in order that it should be Tzeis HaKachavim, and then they signed the kesuba, and then they didn't do the kesuba middle. They could have saved some time, because by the time everyone goes down the aisle and you play whatever you play over there, is this the little whatever, go through all these things, they could have wasted 20 minutes that way, and by the time they get to the chuppah, to the kesuba would have been, but they didn't do that. They did it before by the Kabbalah Spandim, so they waited a whole hour, and then the chassan ran an hour late. But we don't do that. The Rebbe says that we hold that it's okay to do it by day, even though the chuppah is at night. And in fact, a lot of Rabbanim make a point specifically of doing that. So even if, to say, the chuppah is going to be tonight at 7 o'clock, so typically they call the Kabbalah Spannim for an hour before. So very often they write the Tnoyim and the Kesuba, they write out the Kabbalah Spannim. So 6 o'clock is already after Ma'ariv time too. So you could do it then, but some Rabbanim make a point specifically of doing it by day. Rabbanim wanted dafka by day, to do it by day the day before, even though it'll be the earlier date. And this is I think it's a uniquely Chabad thing, and it's based on the fact that the kesuba is a totally one-sided document. It's totally obligations of the chassan to the kala. There's no obligations at all from the kala to the chassan. Modern people are looking for egalitarian kesubas, don't realize that they're really not doing the women any favor when they try to, it's all obligations of the chassan to kala to leave it. But so the chassan can accept those obligations in advance of the chassan, even though it kicks in technically a day before. One of the reasons why that one of the brothers explained to you why Dafka does it that way is because when does a document take effect? I mean, theoretically, it takes effect at the moment that it's signed or at the moment of the kinyan. But when is it enforceable? It's enforceable as of the date that it says. So let's say, and you have, for example, in Gemara, you have a discussion of places where they had the custom of writing not only the date, but also the hours. So if you had a document that was written at 2 o'clock, and then a person writes a bill of sale, sold it at 2 o'clock. And there's another document that says that he sold it at 1 o'clock. So obviously the 1 o'clock document, which took place first, has precedence. That's the one which is valid. And the other one is just a scrap of paper. It's not worth anything. He already sold it. It's not his anymore, right? So what happens if you have a document which has just the month, but doesn't say the date? It says, in Nisan of this and this year, I did such and such. And there's another one which has a specific date, the 15th of Nisan. It wouldn't be 15th Yontif. The 14th of Nisan, I sold it. So which one comes first? So the one that says just Nisan, we have to assume that it took place in the last day of Nisan, because you have no basis to assume it took any time before that. Because it doesn't say. Right? So it can't take effect before it clearly took effect. So it takes effect at the last possible moment, which is the 29th day, or the 30th day of Nisan, actually. Okay, so whereas the one dated the 15th, that clearly starts on the 15th. So that would be the valid document because it's earlier. Okay, so now when you have a document, you wrote in hours, but you write the day. So at what point of the day does it really take effect? At the last moment of the day, because any document which would have been timed earlier would have had a date stamp of earlier would have been more valid, and therefore it comes out, according to his reasoning, that if you make a chuppah tonight and you date it tomorrow's date, so it doesn't really become enforceable until tomorrow at Shkia. So the whole day you don't really have you don't have an enforceable retroactive wouldn't be enforceable for that period of time because because you'd look back and say, well, we only can enforce it as of Shkia. But if you do it the day before, so then again it's a lumdus, which I'm not really sure that it has any practical or even, but that's why he was suggesting that's why I make a point dafka of doing it. But we certainly know you're allowed to do it, and very often do it. And we do especially like very often they do many chasnas they do by the Kabbalah's Padim. It goes right one after the other. You have Kabbalah's Padim, an hour later is the chuppah. But in like in Eretz Yisrael, it's very common that they do the Kabbalah's Padim early in the afternoon, and then later on in the evening they go have the chuppah and they came to a different place. I remember I came to Eretz Yisrael for my niece's chasana, so they did the Kabbalah's Padim in the yeshiva over here, and then they went to a chasana hall over there 3 hours later for the chuppah. In 770, often they would do it right after mincha. They would. When I was a bacher in 770, so I was one of the librarians. So one of the benefits of the job of being librarian was that they would write all the chasnas. They would do write the tnoyim and the kesuba. They would meet with the rav in one of the rooms of the library upstairs in 770. And of course, there always was a little bit of mezainis there or whatever. And then afterwards, they also used that for the yichud room. So as a bacher, an opportunity. So it was like one of the benefits of cleaning up after the cleaning up after the yichud room. You got there was a little got some sweets into the bargain. But they would write it then right after mincha, which is always mincha was by then it was 3:15, so 3:30 they go in. They would write it, and the chuppah could be. There was who was there? It was the chassan, the kala, the parents. You have to call in 2 witnesses. Often there was everybody was related there, so call in a couple of bachrim to be the witnesses. I don't know how many chassanas ksubas I was one of the eidim because I was there because I was one of the librarians. Anyway, so we do it 3:30, and then the chasana would be whatever 7, 8 o'clock at night. So they're not necessarily done together. So very often you wind it by day, and that would be at night. But it wasn't done. I don't think it was done deliberately to make it by day versus by night, but I know, like I say, there are the Rabbanim who make a point specifically of doing that. Okay. So that's one thing about the date. There's a specific format of how to write the date in the kesuba. We spell it out. You don't use letters. You don't say Yud Beishvat. You'd say Shnei Masar Yom. You have to spell out the words. And then so to the year, we always write that's Chamesh Salafim. We start out with the Libriya Sa'ilim to put in the 5,000. So on, even though very often we refer to the dates in shorter form. there's all kinds of shilas. If it happens if you leave out part of the date, if you do differently. Most mistakes that you make in the kesuba, most of them b'diavad are okay. The trouble is that some of them are not okay even b'diavad. That's why you have to be careful. But a lot of, but again, you want to have your document should be done, properly done according to the halachic legal conventions. You want everything to be as right as possible. And for some, but I'm saying that most of the stuff you can every madrich, every rabbi book has a chart and tells you this is how you write the first day, this is how you write the second day, this is how you write the the 23rd and the 25th. This is how to write everything. The hardest date to write is the second day of Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. Sorry, the first day of Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, because then you have to write it Shloshim Yom L'Chodesh Adar Harishon Shehu Rosh Chodesh Adar Hasheni. So using a pre-printed form, there's not enough room to put that in the date. Well, I got one of my customers because he was doing a chassan on that date, and he couldn't find the form to do it. So he knew it on a computer. You can you just the text flows as you need to. So I was able to accommodate him and provide him with kesuba because it's a very long date. By the way, you notice you don't say Adar Rishon, you say Adar Harishon and Adar Hasheni with a whatever.
So you can print all of that out on the computer, other than the signatures. Correct. Everything can be pre-printed.
Correct.
You don't have to write that in by hand, the dates.
Right. That's the thing. I do the whole thing because one of the preferences of halachic legal conventions of a document is that the writing should be uniform. Because once you have different types of writing, it makes it much easier to forge because someone else can come along who can't match the handwriting exactly and write in something else. And there's all kinds of handwritings here anyway, all kinds of forms or whatever of writing. So whereas if everything is uniform, it's much harder to tamper with it. It makes it more tamper-proof. So as a legal document, that's valuable. To have it consistent. And in fact, there are those who write that when you use the printed forms, you should then try to, instead of writing in usual script Hebrew writing, you should write it sort of like a block letter writing to try to match the printed form, which you really can't do that, no matter how good you do it in stick figures making your letters, it's not going to look like the printed form. Whereas when it's done by computer, it's taka done, it is taka consistent and uniform. Throughout the whole thing. Yeah.
So I've been involved in signing before.
Yeah.
On behalf of my brother, actually.
What does it mean on behalf of your brother?
My brother was getting married, and I was.
You can't sign for your brother.
No. There was I signed. I was. Witness? I did some. I wasn't witness.
You couldn't be a witness, yeah.
So that's what I was going to ask. Is who were the participants?
Oh, you were an Arav Kabin probably. That was the Tanoim.
You know what's funny is
that was his topic.
It was your brother who did the hasna.
Okay. Yes.
Shmuel.
All right.
That did the hasna.
Yeah.
But.
Did he get the kesuba from me?
His sons, I think. I
No,
forget
I
who
didn't.
witnessed.
What?
It couldn't have been his son because they're related. His sons were involved as well.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay. All right. You're trying to figure out how you could have been involved.